Hello, horse lovers, and happy Halloween. I'd love to work in something seasonal into my videos, but there aren't a whole lot of Halloween horse stories out there. Well, one of the first ghost stories I ever learned as a kid was the legend of Sleepy Hollow, also known as the story of the Headless Horseman. Well, there's a lot of versions of this story out there, but in case you haven't heard this story, the basic idea is this school teacher, Ichabod Crane, meets this beautiful and extremely rich woman named Katrina Van Tassel. Now, being the most beautiful girl around as well as the richest, every guy for 100 miles wants her, including Brown Bones, who is Ichabod's biggest rival for her. Now, everybody goes to a big fall party. Not Halloween technically, because Halloween wasn't actually celebrated in America that time. Not except for in a few small groups of perhaps Scottish immigrants or English immigrants. Otherwise, where the story takes place in New York, which is once New Amsterdam, it was mostly settled by the Dutch, who didn't really do the whole Halloween thing. But anyway, everybody's celebrating the big party, and they decide, let's tell ghost stories. And one of those stories is the story of the Headless Horseman, who is the ghost of a Hessian soldier who was killed during the recent Revolutionary War. Now, supposedly, he still rides every night looking for his head. Later that night, Ichabod leaves the party and encounters the horseman. Supposedly. It's left up to the reader whether we believe that he really did see the actual ghost, whether it was Brown Bones in disguise. Did he get killed? Did he just get scared off? We don't know. It's left up to our interpretation. Great story, perfect for Halloween, but even though there's a horse in it, the horse isn't really the primary focus. Well, I was scrolling through some books for some ebooks for sale on Amazon, and I thought maybe I'll find something here. And I happened to come across a very short book called The Horse of Sleepy Hollow by Neil Davis. And I'm going to include the link for that, and I will show you some images from this book shortly. But, I thought, it's short, but it might be good. Might be well worth it for Halloween. There's a lot of good short ghost stories out there. So the idea that attracted me to it was that the horse is in charge. It's the horse who chose the horseman. And the role of the horseman is actually sort of passed down. It starts with a being called the Dullahan, which is the Irish version of the Headless Horseman. And it's time for his soul to apparently move on. We don't really get to know that for sure. We just know he's being replaced as the rider, so I'm guessing he moves on. And so the horse is chosen, the fallen Hessian, to be his new rider. And we don't really know a whole lot. I found it to ask a lot of questions, or to raise a lot of questions. And one of my main questions was, who is this book written for? Because it is extremely short. There's illustrations on every page, just a few words on every page. It's written the way you would expect a child's book to be written. And yet the vocabulary, to me, goes way beyond what a children's book would be. Now, that's not to say that some kids can't read at a high level. There are plenty of kids who could read really advanced books, so I'm not saying a kid couldn't read it. But just the way it's worded, it's excellent wording, but it kind of makes me wonder, who this book was intended for. And I will give you an example here. It says, beneath the veil where shadows creep, where moss and fog and silence sleep, a hoofbeat stirs the ancient dread, the whisper of the long-lost dead. The gallows tree stands cracked and bare, its roots entwined with midnight air. Now, a kid might not even know what gallows is. They're not really going to use the word veil a lot. It's not really it's not really worded like for younger kids. And the illustrations for this are pretty creepy. Although I've read scary stories to tell in the dark when I was a kid, and if you want to talk about creepy illustrations, yeah, it doesn't get creepier than that. Compared to that, this is nothing. But I will show you how scary some of these illustrations are. So yeah, you can see how creepy these illustrations are. Now, I find a lot of clues about characterization in here. The writer is very good at showing us who the horseman is. It says here he was a Hessian, a foreign blade hired for someone else's cause, and he fought not for freedom nor glory, but for coin. Blood came easy for him. Now that's a really big exception about the Hessians. They're commonly believed to be mercenaries, German soldiers who signed up on the side of the British to get money. Not quite true. In fact, actually, Germany wasn't unified as a country until 1871. So technically not German. And they absolutely didn't sign up for money on their own. That was their government's idea. They said, hey, let's sign these guys up and we'll hire them out to the British and we can make a fortune. Now, the Hessians were still paid well, but they gotta have been thinking, what am I doing here? This isn't my war. I'm gonna get shot so that my king can get rich and I get dead. Why am I here? But apparently, this particular Hessian liked it. Now, that's obviously the Headless Horseman as a ghost is not somebody you want to come across. But it gives us some information on what he was like in life. And I also find it interesting that he refers to his horse as ordinary here. Well, is the horse so ordinary? Or does he just look down on the horse because he thinks it's beneath his riding abilities? Is the horseman that good of a rider? Or does he just think he is in his own arrogance? It also mentions that he goes out, strays from his company one night. Why would a soldier do that? In my mind, he went out there on a bet, because the forest around Sleepy Hollow is supposed to be really haunted, really scary, even before the horseman's time. So, to me, that kind of seemed like classical horror story. Oh, I'm gonna go out in this haunted forest on a bet, and I'm gonna show all of you cowards that it's fine. Yeah, you're gonna be dead by morning. Well, of course, the horseman does lose his head. We know that already, but the setup for it is pretty good. Now, they bury the horseman, and the Doulahan comes and says, you get to take my place, and the horseman accepts that, and that's pretty much how the story winds up. But now, why did he agree to ride night after night forever? Is he condemned to hell if he doesn't? Does he just like killing and this is his chance to keep killing? Why did the horse choose him? Is he going to continue to learn and become better as a spirit until he can move on? Now, I did a lot of research into the different legends of Headless Horseman after reading this, and there are some versions where the horseman is actually helpful or can be redeemed. So, is that why the horse chose him? Is he kind of the means to his redemption? The guy's blind. He has no head. Does he see through his horse's eyes? Does he just develop that strong of a bond of trust with the horse where he trusts the horse to take him where he's supposed to be even blind? And it's also made clear the horse chooses who the rider encounters, not the rider, not the horseman. Another interesting question I wish this book would have gone into is the story that the ghost can't cross this one certain bridge. They never use that, and I think that's an interesting part of the story.
But once you cross that bridge, my friend,
So basically, I did enjoy this book. I think that any adult would like it as much as a kid. It might seem like it's laid out as a kid's book, but I could see getting together as a family, reading the story around the jack-o'-lantern. If your kid likes this kind of thing, not every kid is into horror, but I could see any adult reading this as an interesting narrative poem. I mean, look at how Edgar Allan Poe wrote The Raven as a scary, narrative poem. Not exactly a full-length novel, but still a master of horror. So, yeah, it's short, but I think anyone could still enjoy it. And personally, I found it more of an inspiration than a story on its own. It left me pondering a lot of things about the horseman and the horse, and wondering how this could really be expanded on. My personal opinion on it is, yeah, it's well worth a read, but I really wish that this had been expanded on. I think this could be potentially a really great full length adult book if it were just expanded. I'm actually going to take my chance at doing that. I don't know how it'll turn out, but like I said, that this really, I saw it more as a source of inspiration than a story on its own. I personally enjoyed it. I enjoyed looking at the scary images. I think it's a nice story to read on Halloween. It's a very good story to read on Halloween. So give it a try. I'm going to include the link to get it off of Amazon in the comments and in the description. Let me know what you think. Have you heard any alternative versions of the Headless Horseman story? What's your favorite version? There's a lot of versions out there. So, happy Halloween, horse lovers, and until next time, keep horses in your life.